The manila folder on my desk felt heavier than any market crash I'd ever weathered at Northgate Financial. Inside, under a stark label reading, Vance Isabella, lay the meticulous architecture of my life's demolition. 10 years. A decade of shared holidays, whispered secrets, and the comfortable rhythm of our Chicago brownstone, all reduced to grainy photographs and damning text logs. My private investigator had been ruthlessly efficient, capturing every clandestine meeting, every secret lover. Tonight was our anniversary. Isabella was upstairs, likely expecting champagne and diamonds. Instead, I clutched the folder. It was the only jewel I had for her. She was about to discover, in excruciating detail, just how much her lies were truly going to cost. I heard the soft click of her heels on the hardwood upstairs. Isabella. For 10 years, that sound meant home. Now it was the overture to a tragedy. She descended the staircase like a queen, surveying her domain. Our domain, paid for by my 60-hour weeks at Northgate Financial. She ran a small, exclusive art gallery in the Gold Coast, a vanity project I'd proudly funded. Looking at the PI's report, I now wondered how many of her private viewings were listed in these pages. She entered the study, a vision in a silk dress I'd bought her in Milan. Her smile was a masterpiece of deception, practiced and perfect. "Ethan, darling," she cooed, her eyes scanning for a gift-wrapped box. "Don't tell me you're still working. It's our special night." I didn't look up from the folder. "I'm not working, Isabella," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the warmth she was used to. "I'm reviewing a portfolio, an acquisition of sorts." I finally met her gaze, letting her see the ice in my eyes for the first time. "Our acquisition." Her smile faltered, a crack in the porcelain. "Our acquisition? Ethan, what on earth are you talking about? Stop being so cryptic." I didn't answer. My mind had slipped its anchor from the present, drifting back a decade. I'd met her at a fundraiser for the Art Institute. I was a rising star at Northgate, and she was incandescent. She wasn't just beautiful. She had a fire, a fierce intelligence that debated modern art with the same passion I reserve for market trends. She spoke of wanting to open her own gallery, a space for bold, undiscovered talent. It wasn't a plea for a handout. It was a mission statement. I was captivated. I saw a partner, not a project. I remembered a cold November night, our third date. We walked along the lakefront, the Chicago skyline a grid of diamonds against the dark. I told her about my ambition to make partner at Northgate before I was 40. She squeezed my hand, her eyes electric even in the gloom. "We'll build our empires together," she'd said, her breath misting in the air. "You in your glass tower, and me in my white-walled gallery. A power couple." I bought into that prospectus completely. I funded the gallery every cent, from the lease in the Gold Coast to the first disastrous abstract expressionist she insisted was a masterpiece. I saw it as an investment in SOAS, our joint venture. Now looking at the file, I saw it for what it was, the corporate headquarters for her infidelity. A beautifully curated base of operations. The file detailed transactions I'd never seen. Trips to Art Basel in Miami with a client named Julian, a sculptor whose work I noted had never once hung on her gallery walls. Lavish dinners with Marco, a supposed art dealer from Florence, expensed to the gallery's account, my account. Each lover was a bad investment, a toxic asset I had unknowingly carried on my books for years. My trip down memory lane concluded. The nostalgia had curdled into something cold and sharp in my gut. I finally looked up from the folder and saw her standing there, the perfect wife, the successful gallery owner, the masterful liar. "The lakefront, Isabella," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of a 10-year lie. "Do you remember what you promised me?" Confusion clouded her perfect features, quickly replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "The lakefront? Ethan, I have no idea what you're talking about. We said a lot of things. We were young." She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture meant to swat away my strange mood. Honestly, if this is your idea of an anniversary surprise, it's falling a bit flat. It's not a surprise, I corrected, my voice as cold and hard as the marble top of the desk. It's a valuation. I pushed the manila folder across the polished wood. It slid with a soft, final hiss, coming to a stop directly in front of her. Happy anniversary. She looked from my face to the folder, a line of genuine apprehension finally appearing between her brows. Her hand, adorned with the 7-carat diamond I'd given her for our 5th anniversary, trembled slightly as she reached for it. She flipped open the cover. The first photograph was on top. A close-up. Her, laughing, head thrown back, in a hotel room that was decidedly not in Chicago. A man's arm was draped around her shoulder, his designer watch clearly visible. Julian, the sculptor. The color drained from her face. The practiced smile, the confident poise, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind the raw, ugly truth. She was no longer a queen in her castle. She was a cornered animal. Her eyes darted from the photo back to me, wide with a horror that was, for the first time in years, completely genuine. What is this?" she whispered, her voice a fragile thing. "That," I said, leaning back in my chair, "is page 1 of the portfolio. An asset review. We can start with Julian Croft. You spent 5 days with him in Miami during Art Basel. A business trip, you said. Page 3 has the hotel receipts from the Setai, billed to the gallery account. Page 4 has more visual documentation of your negotiations." Her breath hitched. She frantically flipped through the pages. A blur of photographs, text message transcripts, bank statements. Each page was a nail being hammered into her coffin. Her denial started as a choked gasp, then found a desperate, shrill voice. "This is insane. It's fake. Ethan, you can't possibly believe this garbage." "Garbage?" I picked up a single sheet from a separate pile on my desk. "This is a transaction log from the gallery's corporate card, the one I fund. Let's see. Marco Rossi, the Apetu art dealer, from Florence. He seems to enjoy the peninsula. A lot. Funny, for all the dinners and flights, your gallery has never logged a single sale from him. The return on my investment, Isabella, is deeply, deeply negative." I let the silence hang in the air, thick and suffocating. Her eyes were glued to a transcript of texts between her and a man named David, a lawyer from a rival firm. They were planning a weekend in Napa. The dates coincided with the weekend she told me she was at a wellness retreat with her sister. "You built an empire on my trust," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm. "Your gallery, your social standing, your entire life. You thought it was yours. But an empire needs a treasury, Isabella, and I was the treasury." She finally looked up, her face a mask of ruin. The fight was gone, replaced by the dawning, sickening realization of a gambler who has just lost everything. She wasn't just looking at evidence of affairs. She was looking at the meticulously documented blueprint of her own destruction. "You called us a power couple," I stated, letting the memory twist like a knife. "But a partnership requires shared risk, shared honesty. You took all the assets for yourself and left me with all the liability. In my world, we have a name for that. It's called fraud." "Fraud." Isabella repeated the word, a ghost of a sound. The fight didn't return. It couldn't. There was nothing left to fight with. She sank into the leather chair opposite my desk, the file still open in her lap. Her manicured hands, which had once held mine with such convincing warmth, looked frail against the damning evidence. "Ethan, what are you going to do?" Her question wasn't an appeal for mercy. It was the terrified query of someone who has just realized the person across from them holds all the power. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang, another bad debt she couldn't pay. Walking over to the bar, my movements were unhurried as I poured a single glass of scotch. Not for her, for me. "Do?" I finally said, swirling the amber liquid. "We're past the barist, doing stage, Isabella. This is the unwinding stage." a liquidation. I took a sip, the burn a welcome, clarifying sensation. As of an hour ago, I instructed my bank to freeze every account associated with the gallery. The corporate cards are declined. The credit lines are severed. Tomorrow morning, a management team I've appointed will arrive to begin a full audit and asset appraisal. They'll be changing the locks. Her head snapped up, a flash of genuine panic, not for our marriage but for her kingdom. My gallery? You can't. The artists. My reputation. Your reputation? I let out a short, mirthless laugh. Was built on my capital. It was collateral. You defaulted. I walked back to the desk and tapped the file. These men, Julian, Marco, David, they weren't just your lovers. In a business context, they were unauthorized expenditures. Embezzlement. Your gallery wasn't a temple to art. It was a discreet clubhouse I was unknowingly funding. Tears finally welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a CEO watching her company get dismantled in a hostile takeover. And us? She whispered, her voice trembling. Our life. This home. This house is an asset held in a trust that I control, I stated flatly, gesturing around the mahogany-paneled study. You are no longer a beneficiary. As for us, that was the initial public offering, a promising venture that turned out to be a shell company. I'm just cutting my losses. I paused, letting the finality sink in. You have until the end of the weekend to pack a bag. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the terms of your severance. I finished my scotch, the ice clinking softly in the sudden, tomb-like silence of the room. She just stared at me, her world collapsing in real time. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just a line item, a catastrophic loss on a balance sheet I was about to wipe clean. Her defiance was a flicker at first, a spark of the woman I once admired. It ignited behind her tear-filled eyes. You think you can just throw me out? After 10 years? I'll fight you, Ethan. I'll drag you through a divorce so public it'll make the front page of the Tribune. I'll tell them everything. I let her threat hang in the air, as weightless as an empty promise. Tell them what, Isabella? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. That your husband of 10 years, who funded your entire life, discovered you were embezzling from your own business to fund a series of affairs? You seem to be confused. You think this is a marital dispute. It's not. This is risk management. She stared at me, the confusion plain on her face. She tried to reach for her phone on the desk beside her, a desperate instinct to call for backup. A lawyer, a friend, a lover. I didn't move to stop her. Go ahead, I said. Call your lawyer. He'll be receiving a fully indexed copy of that file via courier by 9 a.m. tomorrow. A professional courtesy. Or perhaps you were thinking of calling David. The lawyer from your tryst in Napa? I wouldn't. I imagine he's having a difficult conversation of his own right about now. A new, specific kind of dread washed over her. It wasn't just about me anymore. The web was wider than she thought. You see, I continued, walking slowly toward the large bay window overlooking the darkened street. I didn't just review your liabilities. I assessed your entire operation. Your primary asset wasn't art, Isabella. It was your social capital, your reputation. And a reputation, like any asset, can be shorted. I turned back to face her. Let's start with the gallery. You're worried about the artists. Don't be. I spent the last 2 weeks meeting with every single one of them. Maria Flores, whose sculptures you underpriced to a friend. Young Ben Carter, whose commission you pocketed. I explained to them that their gallery was facing a leadership crisis, so I presented them with an alternative. I let that sink in. The Vance Arts Foundation, fully endowed. It has a 5-year plan, a board of directors I handpicked from my contacts at Northgate, and a new gallery space opening in the West Loop next quarter. A bigger one. Better funded. All of your artists, Isabella, have already signed letters of intent to join my foundation. I'm giving them the platform you only ever pretended to. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, I had not just closed her business, I had rendered it obsolete. I had poached her entire world, leaving her with an empty building and a tarnished name. But a business is only one pillar of an empire, I said, moving in for the final, killing blow. The other is influence. Your desperate climb to get on the board of the MCA, for instance. Her eyes went wide with sheer terror. She knew where this was going. David's wife, Caroline Shaw, a lovely woman, head of the acquisitions committee at the museum, a real power broker in this city, the exact person whose approval you've been courting for 3 years. I paused, allowing the silence to stretch. Caroline and I had a lunch meeting this afternoon, a very discreet, very professional one. Isabella began to shake her head, a silent, pleading denial. I didn't show her the photographs, I said, my voice dripping with cold precision. That would be undignified, vulgar. No, I presented her with a different kind of file, a concise summary prepared by my firm's top forensic accountant. It detailed a pattern of financial mismanagement, embezzlement, and unethical business practices tied to the Isabella Vance Gallery. I framed it as a potential reputational risk for the museum, an unstable element attempting to join their prestigious board. I leaned against the desk, my face close to hers. I didn't have to destroy your character, Isabella. I just had to present the facts of it. You were never a power player. You were just a high-risk investment with a flashy prospectus. And Caroline Shaw, like any good manager, understands one thing perfectly: the need to cut a bad asset loose before it infects the entire portfolio. The fight didn't just leave her, it was surgically excised. She was hollowed out. Her phone lay untouched. There was no one to call. Her artists now worked for me. Her social allies were now forewarned against her. Her lovers were liabilities, now scrambling to cover their own tracks. She had built a house of cards on my foundation, and I had just calmly, quietly removed the foundation. She finally spoke, her voice a ragged whisper, unrecognizable. Why? It was the only word she had left. Why do all this? Because you didn't just cheat on me, Isabella, I answered, the last vestige of warmth I ever had for her turning to ice in my words. You made me your accomplice. You made my work, my name, the engine for your deceit. You thought my 60-hour weeks were fore finilis. They were. But you misunderstood the terms of the partnership. I don't tolerate fraud. I liquidate it. This isn't revenge. I picked up the folder and dropped it into the wastebasket with a soft thud. This is a market correction. I watched the last embers of defiance die in her eyes, replaced by a vast, vacant emptiness. The silence in the study was absolute, broken only by the hum of the city outside our soundproofed windows, a world that no longer belonged to her. She didn't move. She just sat there, a statue of a woman who had once been my wife, entombed in the leather chair she'd picked out. Finally, she tried one last, desperate play. Her voice, when it came, was a reedy whisper, a ghost of the confident tone she'd used just an hour before. 10 years, Ethan. Our life together, doesn't it count for anything? I swirled the last of my scotch, the ice a single, lonely cube. It counted, I said, my voice level. It was a long-term holding. I gave it every chance to perform, but the underlying asset was fraudulent. The position had to be closed. There's no room for sentiment in that kind of decision. I placed the empty glass on a coaster with a precise click. Go upstairs. Pack your bag. She flinched, as if I'd struck her. Pack? 1 suitcase, I clarified, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. Personal effects only. Clothing, toiletries, anything of significant value, jewelry, art, electronics, was purchased with funds from the primary account, my account. They are company assets, and they will be part of the liquidation. For a moment, I thought she would collapse. Instead, a strange, zombie-like automation took over. She rose from the chair, her movements stiff and uncoordinated. The silk dress, which had seemed so elegant, now looked like a costume on a disgraced actress. She walked past me toward the grand staircase, not looking at me, her gaze fixed on some middle distance of her own ruined future. I didn't watch her go. I simply listened to her footsteps on the stairs. No longer the confident click of a queen, but the soft, shuffling tread of a ghost. Alone in the study, I felt no elation. No triumphant surge. There was only a profound, chilling quiet. The quiet of a crisis averted, of a balance sheet finally reconciled. I had excised a tumor from my life, and this was the sterile silence of the recovery room. Her phone, forgotten on the corner of my desk, suddenly buzzed against the wood. I glanced at the screen, which lit up with a notification. A text from David S. The preview was short, brutal, and deeply satisfying. Caroline knows. We're done. Lose this number. The ripples of my market correction were already reaching distant shores. I didn't touch the phone. I let it sit there, another piece of evidence in a case that had already been closed. 15 minutes later, she descended the stairs. She clutched the handle of a single gray suitcase. The 7-carat diamond was gone from her finger. Her face was pale, stripped of makeup and artifice, and for the first time in years, I saw the woman she was, without the persona I had funded. She looked lost, older. As she passed the entryway console table, her hand darted out, an instinctual grasp for a small, bronze sculpture, a piece by a young artist she claimed to have discovered. It was the first piece we'd ever bought for the house together. "Leave it," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. She froze, her fingers inches from the bronze. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw a flicker of pleading. "Ethan, please, it was a gift." "It was a gallery acquisition," I corrected her, my voice as hard and unyielding as the metal itself. "Paid for by the gallery account. It now belongs to the Vance Arts Foundation. It will be in their new lobby." I was turning every weapon she had ever used against her, transforming her supposed love of art into just another cold transaction. That was the final blow. Her shoulders slumped in utter defeat. The fight was over. The negotiation was over. The arbitration was over. All that was left was the execution of the verdict. I walked to the front door and opened it, letting the damp, cold Chicago air pour into the warmth of the hall. It smelled of the lake and exhaust fumes, the smell of the real world she was about to re-enter without a safety net. She dragged her suitcase across the marble floor, the wheels making a lonely, hollow sound. At the threshold, she stopped and turned. Her voice was barely audible. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at her, standing on the precipice between the life she had lost and the nothing that awaited her. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a detached, clinical observation. She was a bad investment, finally and completely written off. "I'm sure one of your assets will provide a temporary safe harbor," I said, my voice devoid of all warmth. "Julian, Marco, David, you diversified your portfolio. I suggest you leverage it." I didn't wait for a reply. I simply closed the door, the heavy oak clicking shut, with a sound of absolute finality. The cold was sealed out, 10 years of my life expelled with it. I stood alone in the marble entryway. The house was not empty. It was clean. The silence was immense, a vacuum where the constant, low hum of her lies used to be. On the study desk, her phone buzzed again, a final, desperate twitch from a severed limb. I walked over, picked it up without looking at the screen, and held the power button until it went black. A dead line. I placed it face down, a tombstone for a ghost. I surveyed the room, the art she'd chosen, the furniture she'd arranged. It all looked like a stage set after the play has ended. Impersonal. Assets waiting for appraisal. My gaze fell on the empty space on the console table, where the small bronze sculpture had sat. The space wasn't a void. It was an opportunity. A clean slate. Back in my study, I ignored the scotch. I bypassed the stack of financial reports detailing her ruin. My hands went to a different folder. one bound in blue leather and embossed with a simple, elegant logo, VAF, the Vance Arts Foundation. I opened it. Here was no evidence of deceit, only a blueprint for integrity. Architectural renderings of the new West Loop Gallery, all clean lines and natural light. A mission statement I had written myself, to provide a transparent and supportive platform for Chicago's most promising artists. I scanned the list of names again. Maria Flores, Ben Carter. I hadn't just poached them. I was giving them the backing she had only ever pretended to provide. I was building careers, not just a collection. This was the real portfolio. Not the toxic assets I had just jettisoned, but a new venture built on truth. My victory wasn't the destruction I had wrought tonight. It was the creation that would begin tomorrow. I hadn't just closed a bad position. I had executed the perfect trade. Was hiring a private investigator and dropping the evidence on their anniversary a brilliant move for justice? Or was it a step too far into cold-hearted revenge?